change directions and thinking about asking you about some of your overdose experiences. The first time we ever met, you'd mentioned you overdosed quite a high number of times. It'd be interesting to hear about it.
I've been given Noxilin or Narcan about 20 times in my time as a fentanyl addict. I'll start with talking about how I became a fentanyl addict. I'll start with a UBC study. UBC did a study in their addictions treatment program, and it was with 1,000 clients. And at the beginning of the opioid crisis, about 50% had opiates in their system. And that's just a range from alcoholics to cocaine users to fentanyl users and everything in between. And 1 year later, 1,000 out of 1,000 clients tested positive for fentanyl. So how I became addicted to fentanyl was it was laced in the methamphetamines that I was using. And out of nowhere I started feeling sick. And that's when I started seeking fentanyl in and of itself. And the first time I might have just nodded off, because I would say 2 out of the 20 times I've overdosed, it just felt like I was resting and I got revived. And people would just be standing around me, either an associate, a friend, or paramedics. But 2 out of those times, I would say I died. There was a blackness, it was cold, it's just an empty void. And if I were to relate that to another near-death experience where I almost got hit by a car and it was so close that my body gave me all the hormones to die and I sort of had everything flash before my eyes. This was under a normal circumstance, but in an overdose circumstance, it was sheer cold, sheer black, sheer nothingness. And it took me a while to recover just from the experience. There was it took me longer for my body to warm up. It took me longer to feel touch, emotions. It was very disassociating. It was terrifying. And it was very saddening. And I would try to quit and I couldn't. I didn't want to die. I didn't want to miss the opportunity to see my son again. I didn't want to miss an opportunity to thrive again. I would say after the first overdose experience, it was every day I would have a goal to quit and get away, and it was sheer slavery. I would try to keep my finances as low as possible, my possessions as low as possible to not make me a target. And it was like I was living from $20 to $20 to just buy a single point to get unsick.
Can I ask how long ago that was?
That was 2 years ago. When my son was really little, we had a homelessness campaign called Hope Under the Homeless. And our first campaign was called A Sandwich a Day to Put Hunger at Bay. And that campaign was to develop a one-on-one relationship with somebody. And so what we encouraged people to do was to make a sandwich, bring some food, and meet one person who was homeless. Develop a relationship. And one gentleman, I was trying to develop a relationship. His name was Joel. He panhandled in front of Donald's Market on Nanaimo and Hastings. And I would bring him food every time. And my son said, you know, I don't work for the food, I don't do these things, but what can I do to have an impact on this man's life? And I said, do something that you would do for me. So he went off into his room and he did something. And the next time he went to Donald's Market, he handed him this card. And the card said you mattered, and it was made out of macaroni. It was all of us holding hands. And fast forward nearly 13 years later, 11 years later, I'm the homeless guy. And I'm sitting in front of Shoppers Drug Mart on 4th and Vine. It's at Christmas time, I was singing Christmas carols, and boy the same age gave me the same card. And I prayed and I prayed and I prayed. And this woman came into my life who was a really good friend of my street mom, who taught me how to live on the streets. Not my mother, but my street mom. Trying to do outreach to her. She bought me some food and told me about treatment. And after that Christmas, I was staying in front of an empty business, and two people were drywalling that business. They hauled me into my tent, assaulted me, and threw me in a garbage can and shut the lid and locked it. And when the disposal truck came, I was crying for help. They pulled me out, they gave me a Gatorade, and called the paramedics. And this is while COVID was going on. And they brought me into isolation and took me to palliative care because all the other rooms were full. And it was the same room my mom died in when she died of cancer. And my blood pressure was so low, I wasn't even allowed to have a shower. They put me on Suboxone and Hydromorph, but they didn't dose it right, so it put me into perpetual withdrawal. So it put me into like day 5, and I went into sheer agony. My blood pressure dropped even more. And I had a dream. My mom came to me in a dream and told me to leave the hospital. Probably in psychosis. That's not how I took it. I pulled the IVs out of my arm. I pushed through security, and I got out, and I got into a shelter at the Lookout in North Van, which my street mom's best friend, Angie, she got me into. She did all the phone work. And she did all the phone work, and she got me in interventions. And I got very involved in that treatment program, but in the back of my mind, for whatever reason, I felt I didn't earn it because it was all given to me. And for the longest time of my life, I had trouble receiving. I can give, but I cheat self to lose. I believe there's two types of people when they haven't integrated their ego. They haven't fully balanced themselves. There's the majority that we see out there cheat others to win. You got something I want, I'm going to take it. I'm cheat self to lose. I'll give and give and give. And then when anybody tries to give to me, I'll shut down and then complain about how nobody's giving to me. That's my self-destructive tendencies. So I haven't cured that in myself yet at this point. I still had trouble looking in the mirror and saying, I love you, Dustin. Just didn't feel right. I was spiritually bankrupt. So I built a resentment, and I sort of went in doing treatment with a resentment. So it didn't stick. And 36 hours after my release, I relapsed because I thought it wise to move in with my street mom. She said she was clean and she wasn't. She was selling drugs in the house. And on my birthday, Angie came over with her 2-year-old daughter, and my friend was hovering over a piece of tinfoil, nodding off. My street mom was using, and she and her daughter was witness to that. She just left, and I left the apartment. I said I was going for a walk. I still haven't technically come back from that walk. And I pretty much isolated by myself. And I guess I embraced my dark. I did the shadow work in my addiction.
Living on the streets?
Yeah. I was in Marpole for a bit. I would sell paintings. I would sing songs in front of the Safeway. Around 71st at Granville, where the Safeway is, across from the Salvation Army. I only had a couple of friends that I associated with, and then I went to Yaletown to get close to the Harbor Light Treatment Center, and was on a waiting list for detox and then treatment. I still look back and regret not being grateful, because really I just needed a break and I needed love. Like, but I don't look back at that in shame. It kick-started my heart. It kept me warm. I felt bad that I didn't take that time, that I wasn't able to show authentic gratitude. I was raised a worker, and I like to work for my things. But really I did at that point. Like the insanity that I lived through, the amount of brooms that I had stolen that prevented me from staying clean, the times people stole my stuff and flailed it down a street and I cleaning up while people are looking at me like a piece of garbage. And it wasn't even my mess. I just felt the responsibility and obligation to keep after myself. You know, and keep a calm demeanor while I was the one that was robbed. While still looking down from regular people. You know, having to fight to maintain a cool, calm, and collected demeanor while I'm outside of a place singing songs, selling paintings, but people would go and give love and attention to a dog first, tied to a pole that just went and got groomed and had a pedicure. But I still keep my love for humanity. I believe I worked for that, but at that moment I felt I should have been the one to call the treatment center. I should have been the one. And really I was just sick. I was near death. Like, there was nothing left to give. There was nothing left to do. And I got on a waiting list, and there were many moments in that time where I felt like the warmth of my heart slipping away. And for me, that's the most scariest thing I could go through. That's a panic for me. Losing my humanity. If anybody has the time to get to know me, I'm a very seemingly naive but authentic person. I haven't lost that innocence and childlike wonder I've always had in life. I have street smarts, but I don't have street smarts. I never used violence. I never used retaliation techniques. I never went to go collect when I was robbed. I never acted like that. I just wish I was asked. I got frustrated at God. I talked to God about my problems, you know? And when I felt that slipping, when I felt hatred, I stopped myself. I took myself back. And being in treatment has given me all of that back. I've only had one craving in my 4 months of treatment and 5 months of sobriety. And that was while I was going for my interview for college to become an addictions counselor. I smelled somebody smoking a joint. My head went, geez, a joint would be nice right now. And I went, are you a stupid addiction? You're going to use me going to an interview for an addictions counselor to sneak in and say a joint would be good? And I just laughed it off, you know? And that reminds me that I've always got to be vigilant. But I've worked my program. You know, I've chosen the 12-step program, which isn't for everybody, but it's for me. Because it keeps me connected with people in recovery. It keeps me connected with service. And it keeps me connected in a process that I think is a very good process that anyone should take. I think anybody could benefit from taking the 12 steps, because we find out we're powerless over life, that our lives can't get unmanageable, and that there's a power of your understanding that can help you out through that, and accepting that power, and then making an inventory of all the good and the bad in the life, and looking above it, and then sharing that with somebody to grow through it, to find out what our defects are and to ask to have them removed so we can learn to become a better person. Finding all the people we hurt, making amends to them. That's a path to integrating our mind, body, and spirit. You know, and then making amends, and then making an inventory every day. And then when wrong, admitting it. Just looking through the day and saying what was good and bad, and do I need to make any corrections? That's a legitimate thing to do in life. And then meditating and improving our conscious contact to do service. And then sharing that with somebody else. I don't see that being wrong for anybody. You know, it keeps me in check. It keeps me on purpose. It keeps me on point. Because to me, left on my own devices, I go off all willy-nilly. My mind goes a million miles a minute. And I need that focus. I need that grounding. You know? I think in a world where people push sadness away by looking at their phones, or cheating on their partners, or eating chocolate bars, or every time they get an urge calling DoorDash, or what have you. You know, instead of allowing that sadness to feel that actual joy. I think there's, at least for myself, there was looking out in the world, everybody wants the same thing, and we don't know how to ask for it. I had a friend tell me what he believes his definition of the status quo is. The status quo is going out of your front door and looking at your neighbor's perfect yard and lawn and wondering how they do it, and going back inside yelling and screaming. And your neighbor going out their front door looking at your yard wondering how you have such a perfect life, then going back in and yelling and screaming, and nobody's talking about it. That's the elephant in the room. Everybody goes out and saying they're doing fine when they're not. And not being okay is okay. That's how we grow. That's how we stop judging each other. That's how we connect. We fall in love with people when we hear their life stories. Once we start doing these things, we realize we're the same. When we talk about Occupy, the 99.99% are people who want peace, love, and kindness. And there's a small amount saying, no, we're going to scatter these chips. And everybody's going to point fingers. And they're going to go back in their house and wonder how their neighbor's perfect. And it's not true. You know, look at people in third world countries, and their father, their mother tells their son to walk 3 kilometers to get fresh drinking water. They're never going to say, oh, I need a me day. I'm feeling a little bit depressed today. You know, that brings joy to their face. But here we have this sadness and this thing that we're pushing away that's coming. We got people on Instagram and TikTok who have 2 million views, and they're just shaking in their new cashmere sweater, looking in a mirror alone. They got 1 million likes, 1 million views, but they're doing it in their mirror by themselves with their phone in front of their face. That's sad. It's never going to fix anything. It's okay to be proud of oneself. It's okay to be beautiful and have aesthetics, but to do it alone in a room, how do people fall in love with that? Where's the genuine nature? Where's the triumph through the struggle when everything has to be so? When does it become okay to be not okay? When all everyone sees is perfection. And I can go into 1 million rooms in a 10-hour period on my phone and never have to look within. Addicts like myself are the canary in the coal mine. We're the first ones that say something's wrong. Well, now the coal mine's getting saturated. This planet's getting sick, and the people in it are reflecting that. And that's why I had a goal to develop one-on-one relationships, because I believe we all have the same sickness. That's the one thing I don't like about the program I'm in, is it refers to addicts and normies. I don't believe there's normal people anymore. I believe there's an evolution of consciousness that's happening. I believe the world is going to change into a place, and what's old is going to pass. I think that's a good place to stop.